Andrew, clearly the environment will be an issue at the next election. Is the Labour policy portfolio enough to make sure that they win a majority, and they win a sizable majority?
Well, I think the Tories setting fire to the economy, to public services, to the climate is enough to guarantee Labour the next election. The question is really, are Labour's policies enough when they get into power? And I think we've seen a bit of a wobble over the last week from Labour as well, over ULEZ in London because of the Uxbridge result, which is, polling shows a popular policy in London. The London Labour Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has been rolling it out and got re-elected just last year. So there's no need to have this wobble on this. And I think really the lesson for Labour is that the crisis is the reason to be bolder, not to draw back and be more cautious. And we've seen that on the funding that Rachel Reeves has put forward, the Green Prosperity Plan that her and Ed Miliband have drawn up. That's now being delayed. Well, look, there's lots of things you can do straight away and quite urgently on climate and that affects everything. It affects how you build housing, how you fund public services, lots of other things as well. So I think Labour do need to be bolder, because actually the real issue, really, the real challenge for Labour is, are they going to be bold enough in government on a range of issues, not just the environment?
John, just popping your kind of backroom strategist hat on just for a second. I mean, why did Labour get into such a flap over ULEZ? Why did they not make it clear from the get-go that this was something that was mandated from central government? Why did they not try and split the Mayor of London's office away from the kind of the party proper ahead of the election? I mean, they must have known it was going to be an issue.
Look, by-elections are always about an issue. Boris was meant to be the issue, but he was popular in the local constituency. The Tories found an issue, and the reason why Labour has been focusing on this issue in its head office and in Keir's office is obvious. Labour lost a by-election it should have easily won. You've talked about the poll leads, I've talked about the poll leads, you've talked about, is this Labour's to lose? If the general election is Labour's to lose, we lost Uxbridge. And when the voters reject a Labour candidate, when the swing across the country should have given us that seat easily, Labour does really need to listen. And I think the one thing that is clear about the strategy that Rishi Sunak has now adopted is that he's trying to adopt the on your side mantra. Because really all politics in the end is a race between being on your side and making sure the other guy is out of touch. Sunak is out of touch, and I think Andrew's listed the areas like NHS, public services, the cost of living. But Labour look out of touch unless they respond to a result. When you lose, you have to say, we're listening. Otherwise, you look like you're just arrogant. And I think Labour can't afford to look arrogant, taking votes for granted, any voters of any sort for granted.
OK, Andrew, I can understand John's point as regards ULEZ, but then why are we not seeing perhaps the boldness that you were talking about when it comes to environmental policy in general? I mean, it does seem when you speak to kind of senior figures within the party, it's all about keeping tinder dry, yes, but at the same time, not knowing financially what this next Labour government, if it does indeed become a Labour government, what they might be able to do.
Well, look, there's lots you can do. And, you go back to the 1945 election, Clement Attlee's party inherited a debt 2.5 times bigger than what Keir Starmer will inherit in 2024 or early 2025. They didn't say, let's row back on our plans for the welfare state or the NHS, that'll have to wait, or we better not take into public ownership of, somewhere between a quarter and a fifth of industry. They were bold. They got on with things and did it. So I think we need to see the same commitment from Labour, because as John points out, it's about trying to be on your side. And Sunak thinks he's alighted on something, I'm on the motorist side. You can drive as fast as you want. You can pollute as much as you want. You shouldn't have to pay too much to do so, and stuff the environment. Labour needs to set out where the financial benefits are for people from their policies. And I think that's the thing that's missing, because at the moment we're seeing a kind of drawing in, we can't afford to do that. We can't afford universal free school meals. We can't afford to end the 2-child cap. Or we better delay our climate investment. Where's the offer for Labour? And I think that's the bit that's missing at the moment. I still think because of the damage the Tories have done to the economy, to our public services, to the climate, the failure on housing, that Labour are in prime position. But it's not absolutely set in stone. These things never are. And Labour do need to give people an enthusiastic reason to vote for them, not just a rejection of the Tories.
Yeah, I mean, and Jordan, when it comes to environmental issues, and ULEZ is perhaps an example of this, it's not about incentivising people to be more environmentally friendly, it's punishing them for not, and that doesn't seem to be chiming particularly well with the public. But just in general, I mean, isn't part of the reason that we aren't hearing more from Keir Starmer and others because we don't know when the next general election is going to be?
No, absolutely. I mean, last year, I was talking to an Australian friend, and we both agreed the next election, most likely date, is January 2025. And that's because if you come from an Australian political background or you've been there, governments will run things to the very end. It doesn't matter what precedent is. I know there's a lot of feeling that Sunak has to go next May or would have to go next October or look desperate to go to January. I think that's a real difficulty we've got 15, maybe 18 months till the next election. This government normally has 2 fiscal events every year. So we could be 3 fiscal events away from the next election. So although we know the situation is going to be incredibly difficult when we get into the next election, and after that, if we become the government, we don't know the exact shape of it. Look, Jeremy Hunt rolled out a promise of a childcare strategy in this budget. If Bridget Phillipson had promised that a week before, she'd have been asked for a long time, where's the money coming from? Sunak announced carbon capture and storage yesterday. It built into that strategy is an underpinning guarantee of pricing from the government that the government aren't being chased about. They're being treated like the opposition. We're being treated like the government, even though we're only the government in waiting. Sure. So I think it's going to be very difficult for Labour to know what the actual numbers are, to know when the firing gun is going to be shot. But we will have to have, and I expect the beginnings of it, a conference in October, of what the retail offer is, what the specificity is, what it means for every one of our listeners, every one of Sky's viewers.
But John, just to keep with you for a second, I mean, as you well know, criticism of the leader from the left is nothing new. But in waiting, in holding fire, you are seeing people like Jamie Driscoll, kind of the North of Tyne mayor, leaving the party, being an independent, pointing out the U-turns on universal free school meals, plans to scrap tuition fees, disciplining people in the party. I mean, how much longer can this go on for before there is a sizable chunk of the party that is unhappy currently with the way that they are taking the fight to the Tories?
People can't be that unhappy that we have a 15 to 20 point lead in the polls. Clearly something is going right in taking the fight to the Tories. And I think there's an understanding in the party. We saw it at the National Policy Forum just the other weekend. The unions and the membership were willing to take the Shadow Cabinet's lead and go, we've got to be careful, got to be cautious. We're going to have a vision, but we actually also don't know the situation we're going to inherit. And I think there is inside the Labour Party a discipline that shows it wants to win. Now, wanting to win doesn't guarantee you win, but the consequence of indiscipline is what you see on the Tory side. Rishi Sunak tries to project to the country at large, but what he's doing all the time is trying to manage his internal coalition. He's trying to manage a coalition of MPs who represent currently 25% of all voters. Now Labour's challenge is to maintain its broad appeal to 45% of the population. Sunak is trying to hold on to 25% and strengthen a bit on the edges where it might fragment off. Why did he chase after Nigel Farage and Nigel Farage's battle with Coots and NatWest? Because he doesn't want Nigel Farage to become a political figure again, leading a party which could take 3, 4, 5, 6% of his vote away from him. 2 very different approaches to the next election, one of discipline, one of focus, one maybe of waiting, and the other one of, the Tory party is we want it now, and Sunak has to keep on throwing red meat. Well, every time you find a dividing line, you find a wedge issue, I think Sunak's wedging himself against his own voters, his own potential voters, the blue wall and the red wall.